Good evening. Thanks for joining us on India Business Hour. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines at this hour. No red wave in the U.S. midterm elections as Democrats perform better than expectations. The race to control the Senate and the House remains too close to call. This is a setback for former President Donald Trump, who is the face of the Republican campaign. Facebook's parent company Meta sacks 11,000 employees as one of the biggest layoffs so far this year. This is also the first layoff in the company's 18-year history. Mark Zuckerberg says, and I quote, "I got this wrong and I take responsibility for that." Profit booking on Dalal Street as the Nifty drops 1% from its intraday high. Bank stocks buck the trend. The Nifty Bank Index closing at a record high. The rupee gains ground against the dollar, hitting its highest level in 5 weeks. Cryptocurrencies see a rapid sell-off. Bitcoin briefly drops to its lowest level in 2022. Investor sentiment takes a beating after the world's largest crypto exchange, Binance, steps in to bail out the second largest exchange, FTX, due to a liquidity crunch. Tata Motors reports a 944 crore rupee loss in Q2. Revenue rises 30% year-on-year. Margins also miss estimates. It's a setback for Nirav Modi as the UK High Court orders his extradition to India on the charges of bank fraud. Nirav Modi can appeal before a higher court. The government will release a reworked draft data protection bill for feedback after withdrawing it from Parliament in August. The draft bill is likely to keep social media companies outside the regulatory ambit after concerns over overlapping regulation. Data localization norms may be relaxed as well. That's a CNBC-TV18 exclusive. New government guidelines mandate television channels show content in public interest for 30 minutes every day. INB Ministry to hold consultations with all stakeholders. Implementation likely by the 1st of December. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud takes oath as India's 50th Chief Justice. President Draupadi Murmu administers the oath of office. Justice Chandrachud promises to make it a no-stress court for everyone. As hectic parleys continue at COP27, a new report shows developed nations are historically responsible for higher carbon emissions and are not paying their fair share. The US is paying only 1/5 of its projected amount. The battle for Himachal Pradesh enters the last lap. Prime Minister Modi and Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge hold rallies ahead of the November 12th election. A CNBC-TV18 report finds that the call for restoring the old pension scheme is getting louder. The Congress is promising to restore it if they come to power. Well, a quick check of the market action. Profit booking on the Dalal Street, and we saw the Sensex and the Nifty drop 1% from their intraday high. Now, in the end, the Sensex was down over 150 points. The Nifty dropped nearly 50. Bank stocks continue to buck the trend. The Nifty Bank Index ending at a record closing high today. And in the money market, the rupee ending at a 5-week high against the dollar. This is on the back of higher FPI inflows as well as the global dollar weakness. $1 now costs just over 81 rupees. 81.43 is where it closed for today. The big earnings this afternoon. Tata Motors missing estimates in Q2. The company reported a higher than expected net loss of over 940 crore rupees on the back of treasury losses and a sluggish recovery at JLR. Margins also missing estimates but did fare a tad better than a year ago. Sonia standing by with the Q2 performance for Tata Motors. Missing estimates, Sonia.
Well, Tata Motors reported numbers that were well below what the street was estimating. There was a steep loss that the company reported this time around to the tune of 944 crores. Even on the operational front, the numbers were well below what the street was estimating. Both Jaguar Land Rover and the consolidated business saw losses this time around, and the EBITDA for Tata Motors came in at 5,572 crores, which is much less than the poll of 8,330 crores. Even on the margin front, at 7% margins, it was well below the poll of 10.2%. However, the management commentary is on the positive side. The company does say that the demand continues to remain strong. However, it is monitorable in the wake of global uncertainties. There are improving chip supplies and cooling commodity prices that will aid revenues and margin recovery. Hence, they aim to deliver a strong improvement in EBIT and free cash flows in the second half of the year.
All right, Sonia, many thanks. That's Tata Motors for you. But the big international story, the Democrats have managed to perform better than expected in the pivotal U.S. midterm elections, even as control of both the Senate and the House of Representatives hangs in balance. The party which controls the White House typically loses seats in the midterm. However, the Democrats have managed to avoid a drubbing. Sanjana and Shilpa report on the midterm verdict and why this could be a blow to former President Donald Trump and his ambition to reclaim the White House.
The US midterm elections were a referendum on two different counts. How has President Biden performed in the last 2 years? And how much of a factor is Donald Trump in the Republican Party, and can he mount another successful bid for the White House? While it is hard to definitely answer these questions, two things are clear. The much-anticipated red wave did not materialize. Republicans may still end up controlling the House, but the Democrats did not face a drubbing as they feared, and they managed to defy expectations.
Interesting is the role played by President Barack Obama. He came out late and he came out firing. And for a long time, I think Biden didn't want to be in a shadow, so he was not using him. But eventually, I think when he realized that this is a life and death situation, he brought him in.
Let's focus on some of the key battles. Democrat John Fetterman defeated Republican Mehmet Oz to flip the Senate seat. This is a big win for Democrats, which bolsters their chance of controlling the Senate. Oz was a candidate handpicked by Trump. The control of the Senate remains a close call. Donald Trump's plans to emerge a kingmaker this fall and strengthen his bid for 2024 has received a major jolt. Many Republican candidates endorsed by him have lost. Republican Ron DeSantis won the Florida governor race by an overwhelming majority and could emerge as the front-runner to challenge Joe Biden.
Republicans were absolutely certain. I can say that because I've talked with the leadership right before today, Election Day. They were absolutely convinced that they would win 35, 40 additional seats in the House of Representatives. It's going to be much more difficult to govern the House for the Republicans. It'll be much more difficult for them to oppose President Biden, certainly to try to impeach him, which they keep talking about.
There is no doubt about it that this is a setback for Donald Trump, and for it will certainly give encouragement to other Republicans.
But all is not lost for the Republicans. If they were to become a majority force in the House, they have the potential to act as a bulwark to President Biden's legislative agenda.
President Biden had indicated that he will be looking at the domestic agenda very carefully. I think he will again have to get back to the domestic agenda because the inflation is very high.
The midterms have also thrown up some key milestones. Maryland has elected its first black governor, with Democratic candidate Wes Moore winning the elections. Massachusetts has elected its first openly lesbian governor. Democrat Maura Haley made history by winning that race. And Maxwell Frost, who will be the first Gen Z member in the US Congress.
Well, that is the US midterm election. The race continues to be tight. Facebook's parent company Meta has announced the biggest tech layoff so far this year. The company has sacked 11,000 employees, which amounts to about 13% of its workforce. Shilpa Ranipeta is here with the details. Shilpa, this is the first time that Facebook, in its 18-year history, has decided to lay off people, 13% of its workforce being axed. Mark Zuckerberg says he takes responsibility.
Yes, that's right. This is the first time since Mark Zuckerberg founded the company that he has had to lay off in what is currently the largest layoff this year as well. Nearly 13% of Meta is being let go, amounting to more than 11,000 employees. This is across Meta's family of apps, including Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, Messenger. And in a message to employees, Zuckerberg said that he thought that the move to online and the e-commerce surge that we saw during the pandemic will continue post-pandemic as well, and significantly increased investments in that direction. But that did not play out as expected. Online commerce returned to prior trends, and the microeconomic downturn increased competition. They have caused revenue to be much lower than expected. Zuckerberg says that the company now needs to become more capital efficient. Now, laid-off employees will lose access to most Meta systems today, but will have access to mail. Now, employees in the US will get 16 weeks of base pay with 2 additional weeks for every year they've worked as severance. There will also be RSU vesting, and health insurance will be covered for the next 6 months. This along with career services and immigration support for those on a visa. Now, he said that the support will be similar outside of the US as well. Now, in addition to layoffs, Meta will cut discretionary spending and extend freezing through Q1 as well. Zuckerberg is shifting focus to priority growth areas like AI discovery engine, ads, business platforms, and the long-term vision for the metaverse. Cost-cutting measures also include scaling back of budgets, reducing perks, and shrinking Meta's real estate footprint. Back to you.
Shilpa, many thanks for joining us. So that is the latest from Meta, cutting 13% of its workforce and also putting hiring under temporary hold. In other headlines, Elon Musk has disclosed yet another share sale in Tesla worth $4 billion. Musk has sold Tesla shares worth $20 billion since April. That's when he first made an investment in Twitter. Cryptocurrencies have seen a rapid sell-off, Bitcoin briefly dropping to its lowest level in 2022. Investor sentiment has taken a beating after the world's largest crypto exchange, Binance, steps in to bail out the second largest exchange, FTX, on account of a liquidity crunch. It is a setback for diamond merchant Nirav Modi in the Punjab National Bank scam. He has lost the appeal against his extradition to India, which he had appealed on the grounds of mental health. Our colleague Sanjay Suri joins us now from London with the latest. Sanjay Suri, a setback for Nirav Modi, but winning the extradition case, does it guarantee his actual physical extradition now?
So a big win for the Indian government here. Nirav Modi's appeal against extradition has been dismissed at the appeals court here in London. He was allowed to appeal on the sole grounds of mental health, that extradition to India would damage his mental health, that he has a history of such problems, and that there is a serious risk of suicide. The court ruled that all his references to suicide have been vague and that he has not actually ever attempted suicide, and so this argument was dismissed. But before we get too excited that we will see Nirav Modi in India shortly, we do need to be aware that there is a parallel case that could trip up this whole process of extradition and make the victory pointless, as it did in the case of Vijay Mallya. Nirav Modi too is reported to have applied for political asylum. If that process were to continue, or if his appeal there were to succeed, then the extradition order here would be meaningless. There is, on the other side, on the optimistic side, we can hope that there is a possibility that his asylum appeal has been heard and dismissed. We do not know one way or another because that is a confidential process. But if that appeal has been dismissed, it could be just weeks before Nirav Modi is back in India. On the extradition track, he still has possibility of going to the European Court of Human Rights. That is not likely to admit his appeal, and if that is dismissed, he could gain a very short period of time, only a few weeks, and after that the Home Office could then rule for his physical extradition, and we could be looking at seeing Nirav Modi back in India within weeks, unless that is tripped up by his asylum appeal.
Well, we'll have to see what happens, whether that asylum appeal has been dismissed. We don't know, as Sanjay points out. That is a confidential proceeding. Now, the government will release a reworked draft data protection bill for feedback after withdrawing it from Parliament in August. Now, the draft bill is likely to keep social media companies outside of the regulatory ambit. Ashmit Kumar joins us with more in this exclusive story. Ashmit, it's been a long wait. Are we finally likely to see the draft bill make its date in the winter session of Parliament? And what are the proposed changes?
Well, it's been a long time coming. You pointed out 2017 is when we had the Puttaswamy judgment, which upheld the right to privacy. Since then, we've seen back and forth, with the latest being that the centre had withdrawn the bill from the Parliament on account of what they had called were excessive amendments, and a complicated regime is what the centre had called it, and had withdrawn it. What we understand is that they've paid heed to some of the advice that they received from some of the intermediaries, some of the stakeholders. So as far as what the deadline looks like, well, at least it will be open up for public consultation by the end of November or by early December. That's the indication that sources within the government are telling us. As to what the changes could look like, well, the broader theme that the government is trying to convey is that, look, we're looking for a simple regime. We're looking for ease in compliance. We're looking for a regime that is not averse to startups, that is supportive of startups. As to what exactly those changes are, well, there are a couple of takeaways here important to keep in mind. There was a lot of feedback received on account of data localization, storage and processing norms. These are conditions which one understands that are likely to be relaxed. That's what sources within the government are telling us. That's one. The other important takeaway is social media companies, intermediaries. The earlier regime, the bill that was before the Parliament had sought for overriding powers being given to the Data Protection Authority that it would exercise over these intermediaries. What we understand is that these social media companies, given that they're already regulated under the IT Act, are likely to be taken out of the regulatory ambit of the data protection bill. So that's the second key takeaway. The third is this bill was found to be excessive. Data protection bill was found to be excessive as it went even as far as to specify conditions for hardware and for devices. That is again something that in fact received a lot of lashback from the stakeholders, from the industry, and that is something that the government sources tell us is something that the bill will be aware of, will be wary of, and will keep these devices and regulating them out of the ambit of the data protection bills. But clearly all eyes now on the government, on MeitY for releasing it for public consultation, and that's when we can begin to get more clarity on the timeline going forward.
Ashwath, appreciate you joining us. Now, the union government has approved new guidelines for uplinking and downlinking of TV channels. According to the guidelines, no prior permission is required for a live telecast of events. Guidelines make it mandatory for TV channels to air a 30-minute program every day in national interest and public service. What that exactly is has not been specified. There are 7 to 8 themes, apparently, that the government has identified. But the INB secretary also saying that they will consult with stakeholders as far as implementation of this particular guideline is concerned. It also removes the restrictions of transfer of one channel to another. The ministry is aiming to notify the rules by the 1st of December. Here's the INB secretary.
से किसी चैनल को SD से HD करना है या अपनी लैंग्वेज बदलनी है तो इसको हमने सुचारू कर दिया है। इसमें अब जो है हमारे यहाँ परमिशन लेने की जरूरत नहीं है। लाइव जैसे टेलीकास्ट कई चैनल्स करते हैं उसको अब जो है हमारे यहाँ आके परमिशन की जरूरत नहीं, केवल रजिस्ट्रेशन से ही काम चल जाएगा। 30 मिनट का लोग इसमें जो है अपने तरफ से दिखाएं जो कि नेशनल इंपॉर्टेंस या नेशनल इंटरेस्ट की चीज़ें हों। उसमें 7-8 हमने जो है थीम्स दिए हैं, चाहे वो वुमेन एम्पावरमेंट हो सकता है, एग्रीकल्चर हो सकता है, शिक्षण हो सकता है, और इस तरह के थीम्स के ऊपर भी लोगों को वो अपने कार्यक्रम दिखाएं। ये इसमें प्रावधान रखा गया है।
That is the INB secretary. A CNBC-TV18 News break is confirmed. The union government has released the framework for its sovereign green bond, providing for flexibility for unutilized funds to be rolled over for 2 consecutive years. Proceeds raised from the sale of bonds will be used for eligible green projects that fall under the renewable energy, clean transportation and other categories. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud has taken oath as India's 50th Chief Justice. The 62-year-old will head India's judiciary till the 10th of November. An alumnus of Delhi's St. Stephen's College and Harvard, Justice Chandrachud practiced as a lawyer in the Bombay High Court and the Supreme Court before being elevated as a judge. Abhimanyu Sharma reports on the career graph of Justice Chandrachud and the challenges that lie ahead.
I, Dhananjay Yashwant Chandrachud,
having been appointed Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of India,
having been appointed as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of India,
President Murmu administered the oath of office to Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, who took charge as the Chief Justice of India. Soon after taking oath, Justice Chandrachud paid tribute to the Mahatma Gandhi statue in Parliament. Speaking to the media, he promised to protect all citizens and give confidence to people not only with words but also with his actions. Justice Chandrachud served as an additional Solicitor General for India from 1998 to 2000. He became an additional judge at the Bombay High Court, where he spent more than a decade. In 2013, he became the Chief Justice of the Allahabad High Court, and in 2016, he was elevated as a judge to the Supreme Court. He was surrounded by music during his childhood. His father, Justice Y.V. Chandrachud, was a trained musician and served as the 13th Chief Justice of India. His mother sang for the All India Radio. Justice Chandrachud lives in Delhi with his wife Kalpana Das and their foster children Mahi and Priyanka. In an interview to the Indian Express, Justice Chandrachud said, and I quote, "My mission is to make our system more simple, more transparent, more efficient, so that the interface of common citizens with the judiciary becomes easy, simple and transparent." End of quote. He went on to say, and I quote again, "We need to bring in more diversity in the judiciary. The face of the judiciary which we see today is the product of the state of the legal profession 3 or 4 decades ago." End quote.
CJI Justice D.Y. Chandrachud has said that judicial, technological and registry reforms will remain a priority for him. What can't be ignored is the mounting pendency of cases across all courts in India, the huge vacancies for judges in lower courts and tribunals, as well as the difficulties faced by the common person in approaching the judiciary. In Delhi, with video journalist Rajendra, this is Abhimanyu Sharma for CNBC-TV18.
Justice D.Y. Chandrachud takes office. But coming up next, our coverage of the COP26 Climate Summit. A new report shows developed nations that are historically responsible for higher carbon emissions are not paying their fair share. That and more when we get back. Representatives from 198 countries in a huddle in Egypt hoping to strike a deal to reduce the harmful impact of climate change. At the COP27 summit, climate compensation and financing take centre stage. Radhika Das and Arundhati Ramanan delve deep into a new report on carbon emissions which shows developed nations who have historically contributed to higher emissions are simply not paying their fair share.
We are on a highway to climate hell with our foot still on the accelerator.
For the first time in 28 years, funding for loss and damage caused by climate disasters is included on the agenda at the annual climate summit. India has been among the developing nations pushing for this over the last many years. Union Environment Minister Bhupendra Yadav made a pitch for a proper definition of climate finance and asked rich nations to step up and contribute their fair share. Speaking at COP27, Bhupendra Yadav said, and I quote, "Climate finance is still a mirage, and effective climate adaptation such as early warnings for all helps us collectively in our region toward reducing vulnerabilities and ensuring preparedness and swift and timely response to natural hazards." End of quote. Wealthy nations promised to contribute $100 billion by 2020. 2 years on, they are far, far away from meeting this target. What's worse, an analysis by Carbon Brief shows they are not even contributing a fair share equivalent to their emissions. Take the United States, which should be contributing $39 billion, which is equivalent to its carbon emission. But the report shows US provided a mere $7.6 billion in 2020. This is less than 1/5 of the fair share US should be contributing to climate financing.
What the analysis that we have just completed at Carbon Brief shows is that they have not only failed to meet that target, but the contributions that several countries have made are far out of step with their historical responsibility for climate change. So the US, which is responsible for 1/5 of all CO2 emissions that have been released, they have only contributed $8 billion in 2020, which may sound like a lot, but it's 32 billion short of what they should be committing.
The US is not alone. Many rich nations are not paying their fair share for climate financing. Canada is contributing only 37% of its fair share, Australia is at 38%, and the UK is paying 76% of its fair share in comparison to its emissions. Countries like Germany, Japan, and France are the exceptions. They have been paying more than their fair share, but there is a catch. These nations are providing loans and not grants.
The COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine have led to a rise in energy costs across the world. Green energy transition has temporarily taken a back seat. But the threat of climate change is only getting worse, and the call for equitable climate financing is only getting louder. In Mumbai, Radhika Das.
Well, let's shift focus now to Himachal Pradesh. Prime Minister Modi campaigning in the state ahead of the assembly elections scheduled on the 12th. Addressing a rally in Kangra, the Prime Minister said Himachal Pradesh needs a stable and strong government of double engine, linking the Congress with instability, corruption and scams. Kangra district has the most number of assembly seats. Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge was also in Himachal, spoke at a rally in Shimla along with Chhattisgarh Chief Minister Bhupesh Baghel. Kharge accused the BJP of fooling people with false promises. In December of 2003, the NDA government abolished the old pension scheme, replacing it with the National Pension Scheme in April 2004. This has not gone down well with the people of Himachal Pradesh, especially retired government employees. Santegura reports that demands to restore the OPS have picked up steam in the run-up to the state elections. The Congress has made this its cornerstone for its campaign.
This is 62-year-old Haridas's tea and Maggie stall in Kufri, one he started soon after retiring as a peon at Thiok's Government Boys Senior Secondary School, where he worked for 24 years. But this wasn't his original retirement plan. He blames his return to a hard life on the central government's decision to abolish the old pension scheme and replace it with the National Pension Scheme. His last drawn salary was 25,000 rupees a month, and under the old pension scheme, he would have received half of that as pension, around 12,500 rupees a month. Under the NPS, state government employees contribute 10% of their salary to their pension fund. The state contributes an equivalent amount. This money is then invested in earmarked investment schemes, and the returns on this will determine the pension payable.
ये इसलिए नहीं हो पाया जी, जब हम रिटायर हुए तो मेरे को 1300 रुपए पेंशन मिल रही है, तो इसलिए अब गुजारा नहीं हो रहा है, ना चाय पीने को मिलती है, ना खाना खाने को मिलता है। तो 1300 रुपये से ना सिलेंडर भरता है, एक पौच तेल खाता है। अब कैसे होगा मैम जी?
Haridas is not an isolated example.
There are at least 3 lakh government employees like Haridas in Himachal Pradesh who are demanding the restoration of old pension scheme. And considering their strength, they have the power to impact the election results by a huge margin. And these government employees, whether they are retired or currently serving, they are clear on one thing, that only those who will restore the old pension scheme for them is going to get their votes.
तो कांग्रेस सरकार बोल रही है कि हम जो है क्या नाम ओपीएस आपको जो है वो जिसी वक्त सत्ता में आएंगे उसी वक्त पहली कैबिनेट में आपका जो है वो ओपीएस बहाल करेंगे, ये आश्वासन दिया है। तो इसलिए हम सोचते हैं कि हम अपना वोट जो है वो कांग्रेस को ही दें।
For the ruling BJP, this is a catch-22 situation. The old pension scheme was abolished by the NDA government in 2003, and bringing it back in the state will prove awkward. But with elections drawing closer, the state leadership is taking the issue seriously.
यानी कि उम्मीद है कि ओपीएस वापस आ सकती है हिमाचल। मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि ओपीएस आए, चाहे ओपीएस का इसका कोई एक सॉल्यूशन कोई निकले, कोई रास्ता निकल आए, और वो निकलेगा तभी जब केंद्र सरकार इसमें आगे बढ़कर के मदद करेगी, और केंद्र में भाजपा की सरकार है।
The Congress has already bitten the bullet.
The biggest issue that the day Congress party is sworn into power, the first decision by the cabinet of the Congress government will be the restoration of OPS.
A restoration of the OPS will come with added cost for the state government. Experts estimate that it could result in a one-time expense of around 2,000 crore rupees and work out to a yearly recurring expenditure of over 700 crore rupees. And with government employees making up over 5% of the state's electorate, this demand cannot be swept under the carpet. In Himachal Pradesh, Santiago.
That's it then on this edition of India Business Hour. Thanks very much for watching. Stay tuned. The news continues here on CNBC-TV18.